Animal cruelty, insubordination, attempts to carry out death threats. These are just some of the warning signs on record. Countless dots now beginning to connect. Far too late.
Each of them are sort of like a canary in the coal mine. They're sort of warning you that this is someone who's not stopping.
Devin Kelly's troubling paper trail shows a man that grew more violent over time. High school disciplinary records obtained by CNN show 7 suspensions, including drug offenses and skipping class. But by 2012, he was facing assault charges in military court. And he had escaped from a behavioral health clinic where he was being held ahead of trial. When officers found Kelly after that escape, they recorded that he, quote, suffered mental disorders and had been, quote, caught sneaking firearms onto the Air Force Base where he was stationed. All this after making death threats against his chain of command. Texas law prevents the sales of guns to anyone with involuntary psychiatric hospitalization. The question is, was Kelly's visit involuntary, as it seems to be? Was it then reported to the national background check system as required?
Stories like his have existed for, all of mankind. And the difference today is, of course, the capacity to kill so many people so quickly with the accessible weaponry we have in the United States.
In military court, Kelly pleaded guilty to aggravated assault against his wife and young stepson. Actions so violent, sources say, the toddler suffered a fractured skull. A history of domestic violence is yet another red flag that would prevent a gun purchase under current law. But it must be reported to the FBI to make any difference. Kelly's assault conviction resulted in him being discharged from the military for bad conduct, but the Air Force now admits it failed to relay Kelly's conviction to law enforcement.
Throughout his life, he essentially kept pushing the envelope, and he never seemed to face the consequences that he needed to face for being the kind of person that he was.
Other red flags. In 2013, Kelly was investigated for rape and sexual assault, but he was never charged. A year later, animal abuse charges came after neighbors told police Kelly was seen punching his pet husky.
What we see is the siloing of that information. So the high school knew, the military knew, the mother-in-law and the wife knew, but none of them are looking at this with in totality.
And finally, just days before the massacre, the pastor of this church told the sheriff he felt uneasy about the presence of Kelly.
He just said he didn't think he was a good person, and he just didn't want him around his church.
Columbine. Virginia Tech.
Tucson.
Aurora.
Fort Hood. Oak Creek.
Newtown.
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 How many more?
How many more? How many more colleges? How many more classrooms?
How many more movie theaters?
How many more houses of faith?
How many more shopping malls?
How many more street corners?
How many more?
How many more?
Enough.
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 Demand a plan.
Right now. As a mom.
As a dad. As a friend. As a husband.
As a wife.
As an American.
As an American.
As an American.
As a human being.
For the children of Sandy Hook.
Demand a plan. No more lists of names. It's not too soon.
It's too late.
Now is the time.
Before we all know someone who loved someone on that list.
No more lists.
No more.
Who they might have been. No more.
If we had just done something yesterday. It's time.
We can do better than this.
We can do better than this.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time for our leaders to act.
Demand a plan. Right now.
Right now.
You! Demand it!
Enough.
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 I want to go through here a couple of things, what the media got wrong about the Sutherland Springs shooting, now that the dust is kind of settled. Question of the day. Have you found it increasingly hard to get a straight story on this? I found this to be the case progressively with each shooting, but particularly this last one. And I don't just mean like online fake news and clickbait sites, but even from mainstream outlets with updates that, we've tried to give you. The radio silence you see from CNN and some of these mainstream outlets is odd to me. It's deafening. Have you noticed that? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting to this point where I'm paranoid, but to lead this off, I've discussed this. I think that the firearm argument in this country, the Second Amendment argument that's taking place, it occurs between two parties, gun owners and the completely uninformed. For evidence of that, roll MSNBC clip.
Someone has to help you cash a check, but you can buy a gun.
Well, that's the root of the argument for why we need to start talking repealing the Second Amendment, because so long as you have a constitutional right to it, the number of laws that you can pass to prevent people like yesterday's shooter from acquiring weapons is going to be limited. And I said this earlier, it should not be easier to get a gun than it is to get a beautician's license. It should not be easier to get a gun than it is to get a driver's license. This is a potentially deadly weapon.
Right, because a 16-year-old texting behind the wheel of a Chevy Suburban isn't.
Not at all. Exactly. Not at all. That's first car I learned to drive, by the way. Chevy Suburban? Yeah, it could have killed a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, think about it.
You were aiming for animals.
Driving tons of steel glass and gasoline behind you.
Yeah.
To get a firearm, you have to have a state-issued ID. Yeah. Usually it's a driver's license. Either way, you have to go through the process. So he's wrong 2 times here.
Yeah.
You have to go through the process to get a state ID and then use that to then go through the background check when you purchase a firearm. Anyone who has purchased a firearm knows that this is false.
Yeah.
But at least he's being honest now, just saying we should repeal the Second Amendment.
Yeah. He's come down to the actual point that they want. They live in a fantasy world that none of us can live in, where guns don't exist, and that's that's not what happens.
Well, because none of the laws they propose would have stopped any of these shootings. They know that, and the only thing that would stop it in their eyes would be a complete repeal of the Second Amendment. And then there's this other little nugget.
Why do you need any assault rifles? An assault rifle is different than a gun.
What was that?
Excuse me? Baking powder?
This is news? This is television. An assault rifle is different than a gun. Do tell.
Do tell.
Okay, so this is just, again, uninformed and firearm owners, but here's some claims that they made. The media has made that's verifiably false. So one of the claims that we saw, I think it was CNN, they reported that the shooter was Sam Hyde. Roll the clip, then we'll provide context.
Do you know anything about the attacker?
We don't. It was reported to me that he's actually not from this community. Apparently, his name was released as Sam Hyde. That was the name I was given.
It's a classic 4chan meme. It's a joke about every shooting. They put it out, Sam Hyde. It's troll bait.
Oh, no.
And the media is consistently bamboozled.
Funny thing about CNN, state-of-the-art studios, no access to Google.
No access to Google. They're like the Burgermeister Meisterburger when Kris Kringle keeps bringing in toys. Just check the stockings, CNN!
that was your Democrat representative. Good on you, voters.
Another claim that the shooter purchased the weapon through the domestic violence loophole.
Oh, good Lord.
Left-wing agencies been promoting that this is a new fictitious loophole. I don't even know. I have a chip to process this sometimes where I'm like, I don't know how to process this in any other way than reductive. There are laws preventing people, in case you didn't know, people with domestic violence charges from purchasing firearms. That's been there for a long time. The employees just, they failed to log the info on the shooter. And the domestic violence loophole. But what do you mean by, well, he broke the law. He shouldn't have been able, he broke the law. That's the loophole?
That's the loophole.
Also, you know what else he got through the loophole? His domestic violence. Breaking the law is not a loophole. It's like there's the rape in the alley loophole. There's the Kevin Spacey touch a little boy when parents aren't looking loophole. But what do you mean? He just did it anyway. He did it. He raped someone in an alley.
You just can't fix stupid.
How do they just take anything? The good thing is now they've overreached. So the gun show loophole is a joke.
Yeah.
It's the new cause du jour. They got to get that loophole closed because, and when they fix that, there'll be a new convenient loophole.
Bad person loophole.
The bad person loophole.
I read this and my brain froze for about 5 seconds. So nobody believes this. There's a domestic violence loophole. Like if you were to read the law, there's a law in the books like Section 1A, those who commit domestic violence shall not purchase firearms. Section 1B, subclause, except there's a loophole.
But you have to figure it out.
He beat his wife over a casserole, and then he got a gun.
You can't do that.
I just read this on, I really had a moment where I'm thinking, am I just really stupid?
At some point, you question your own sanity.
Domestic violence loophole. Anyway, it's been all over the news.
Yeah.
News. Okay, so another one that they used was, they claimed that the shooter used an evil assault rifle, right? But the good guy with the gun used a hunting rifle. Now this comes from Slate.
Slate.
Said Kelly used an assault rifle in his church massacre. The weapon used by Williford has been described merely as a rifle.
Merely.
Which suggests a hunting or sport rifle rather than an assault weapon. Incorrect!
They don't even know why that paragraph is so embarrassing. They don't even know.
First off, they're wrong in their claim, and then they're wrong in their suggestion from the claim. Now, Williford, we had the exclusive interview with him, an extended interview you can watch on our channel. Yeah. He was the good guy with the gun. He used an AR-15, the same kind of firearm that the leftists always want to ban.
Yeah. And by the way, also a sporting and hunting firearm.
Yes, I know.
It's weird. It's like synonyms.
Stephen is quite proficient with.
Yeah, so's Not Gay Jared. So are you.
Knocked it out.
And by the way, Slate did retract this only after being called on it by, I think, Rob Eno at Conservative Review, so they issued a retraction. But I just don't... How do you get it that wrong?
Yeah.
And it leads into another claim that you've seen. They've claimed that his heroism, Williford, didn't accomplish anything because the shooting was already over. So this is something, here's why they do this. Because the whole good guy with a gun narrative, the left has been saying, no, that's not really true. What do you think? You're Rambo? You think you'll save anyone with your gun? They've tried to claim that it doesn't exist. Here is a picture-perfect scenario of a good guy, a borderline saint, a man who looks like Santa Claus who rides Harleys for underprivileged children using an AR-15, saving lives, and they want to brush it under the rug. They say, no, there's nothing to see here. Here's something that they don't report, okay? First off, you wanted to say something, Gerald?
I was going to say that, yeah, you see that, and then you see the little subset that says, and if prayers would have helped, they were praying in church. You see that little anti-Christianity thing right on top of that. Yeah. So they don't want to acknowledge that this guy was a good guy with a gun that they're scared of, or that Christians have any kind of bearing on this country at all. I know. I was so... I don't even...
Well, it's just remarkable to me. It's a guy went in and he shot up a church.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
thoughts and prayers that way. If prayers would have helped, they would have been saved. I'm like, that's not true.
It's a cliche.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thoughts and prayers thing. I think it's something that people say, like in French, they just always say my condolences. It's just the main thing that they say when someone dies. You're like, okay, you have to say it. That being said, just don't attack the people who say it. But they said this wouldn't have stopped anything because the shooting had already occurred. Now, here's the truth. The shooter was actually walking around making sure that people were dead, finishing them off, execution style. And Williford interrupted him. One survivor actually told the story about how the killer stopped right over her and was about to shoot, but was drawn away by Williford. Now, Williford also, on our show, said that allegedly there were more guns and ammo in the shooter's car.
Wow.
That's not exactly a get the hell out of Dodge mobile. Now, we can't confirm that, but that's what's so remarkable about this story. It's almost impossible to confirm anything. I mean, we had Stephen Williford on the show. We just so happened his daughter's a fan.
Yeah.
And he was giving us information, and I'm going... How is nobody else picking up on this?
Well, I think you nailed it at the beginning of this segment. It was proactive misinformation because this, I really, you look through this thing, and I don't know how any pro-gun control advocates can look at this honestly and say this is a good case for them. This is their worst nightmare. Stephen Williford is their worst nightmare to show up and save the day because it disproves so much. Yeah. It is the good guy with the gun. It is solid proof of the good guy with the gun.
And it's a good guy with the gun they hate the most.
Exactly. And that's got to be
NRA,
right.
good guy.
An NRA, here is, okay. So
white man.
What you have been told, right, we'll wrap this up. What you have been told is that a man legally purchased an assault rifle, which is different from a gun, legally purchased an assault rifle and killed a bunch of people in a church and died from self-inflicted wounds, and there was some other guy with maybe a hunting rifle who helped speed it along, but oh my God, there's no gun. Here's the truth, okay? A man, and he purchased it, by the way, through the domestic violence loophole. The truth is, a man illegally purchased firearms. He had no business procuring those firearms in the first place. He shot up a church full of Christians, likely motivated by militant atheism, and he was taken out by a good Christian with an AR-15, quote-unquote, assault rifle, which isn't like a gun. That's exactly what happened here. An NRA certified instructor, mind you, was the one who saved who knows how many innocent lives. And that's one thing, too. When we talk about this, we always talk about gun crime. You are at least, if you take the highest gun crime stat, including suicide, including accidental deaths, including gang violence, if you take that number and you compare it with the minimum number of lives saved by firearms, which is at least 500,000 to 3 million, we've covered it on the site a bunch of times, you're at least 16 times more likely to be saved by a firearm as a lawful citizen than killed by one. It's up to 60, depending, because it's really hard to know how many times someone's life gets saved by a gun. Often it's just pulled out and that person's life is saved. Here we have an example of someone potentially saving dozens of lives. We certainly know that he stopped an active shooter, and the media covers it zero. They pivot to gun control, specifically regarding the gun that this guy used to stop an active shooter. I guess you can make it work if you use the domestic violence loophole? Is there a stupidity loophole? Let's work on that loophole. Hey, did you like this video?